Welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. We're here to chat about humane leadership in a way that's real and relatable, tackling work life challenges and offering practical advice to navigate tough decisions. Whether you're leading a team or navigating your own career, we've got you covered. I'm Chris Olerking, a Fortune 100 IT leader, and with me is Roberto Torres, a startup engineering leader. We'll dive into real world stuff, share experiences, and offer guidance on leading with compassion while keeping your career on track. Today, we'll discuss how to remain optimistic versus positive and coach our team in challenging times. Hey, Roberto, this is an interesting thing because I used to always be accused of being a bit pessimistic, which I never was. I was really more of a realist, but optimism and positivity are good things, but they are different.
Wow, I never thought that you would be considered as pessimist. I would think otherwise.
It happens, maybe not so much from this channel, but
Okay. Got it. Well, I think there is a huge difference between being optimistic and being positive. Positive, I think, with a short answer, it would be positive. It would say, yes, everything will be good, everything will be nice. And being optimistic is grabbing reality and understanding the things that you could control versus the ones that you wouldn't, and setting a path to be in this control as much as possible. Don't you think?
absolutely. And I don't there are times and places for kind of both the optimism attitude and the coaching to try and think more positive. In other words, if some of the things that we're thinking are so negative, it can impact our attitude towards things, right? And so we need to balance, and I think this is where people would get me wrong sometimes, is I'm not thinking of the negative things saying that's the only thing that's going to happen. I'm thinking of the negative things to plan, be an optimist, maybe be a little positive, right? Is to plan in case that bad things happen, I can make something positive happen out of it, right? So I'm having an optimistic perspective that no matter what, the bad thing that I'm saying could happen, I'm going to figure it out and how to work through it and come out on top, right? So they're this kind of optimism versus positive thinking. I have found that some people who were very positive refuse to acknowledge anything bad or negative could happen. So then they would not plan for it. And then if
Yeah.
they lost a job or the project didn't go well or they were completely blindsided and not prepared. And I think that optimism, really you're much better to be an optimist to me than just always have a positive attitude because optimism acknowledges that some bad things can happen, but ultimately, if we work through it, good will occur.
Yeah, indeed. I love what you say. And I have faced too many times people who are positive, but the problem with that is that they think that life it's only has only two paths, the bad and the positive. So being in a positive way will be everything cool and everything better, but it isn't like that. Life, it is a rocky way. It is a rocky path. Sometimes tomorrow we will face a problem, a challenge that we might get solved, and sometimes it wouldn't. So either by sticking to the same path or acknowledging that life it is as it is and being optimistic that if you, let's say for instance, that maybe you're unemployed, being positive that next week I'm going to find a job. Maybe you wouldn't, but if you stay optimistic, what you will do is to train yourself to learn more stuff. Maybe you're out there of stuff that it is right now training. Learn that, modify your resume, have an optimistic mindset because that's the one that will be more set up for life rather than this imaginary world. So I think optimistic is much aligned to reality than to fantasy.
Exactly. Because I think that if you believe that you're going to coach your team and get them to only be positive, some things are going to fail, and that's going to be exhausting, right? They're going to be, oh, everything's great, everything's super. And every time something bad happens, they have to try and put forth energy and overcome that because I'm going to be positive. And you're trying to
Mhm.
coach them to only be positive. But, you seem kind of, I don't want to say foolish or ignorant, but you seem untruthful if
Naive.
you're always being positive and not acknowledging that, yeah, but this bad stuff happened. And an optimist can acknowledge that, yes, bad things could happen or bad things did happen, but on whole, on net, we'll make positive out of this. Like, hey, the project was a complete failure. Great, but we learned what doesn't work. So we will not use that technique anymore and we will do something different. And that's the optimistic perspective versus the positive person, right? So the positive person's exhausted because they said, this is going to work and it's going to be great. And then it didn't. And that positive thinking didn't work. But an optimist says, well, I learned from that mistake and I won't repeat it. So I really think that the humane leader needs to coach in the direction of optimism, occasionally using positive thinking to help maybe somebody who's turned very negative, right? And that they have no optimism left in their soul. All right. So then maybe a little positive thinking helps them get over the hump. But as a leader, being humane is about acknowledging, just like you said, that reality. 100% of the things don't go perfect for everybody. Even Elon Musk has had rockets blow up,
Yeah.
right? Mr. On top of the world has more money than anybody. You'd think, well, he's a positive thinker. Well, he might do some positive thinking, but he's more of an optimist in that I'm going to overcome these problems and I'm going to learn, even though that rocket blew up. We're going to look at the parts and we're going to make it better the next time. That's an optimist. That's not positive thinking. That's being optimistic that we will learn from these mistakes and do better. And I think if we coach our teams to approach everything that we're doing from a optimistic and realistic perspective, then whatever the outcome is, you can have some optimism or some positive things about it, right? You're going to learn from those mistakes.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing, excuse me, one thing that is really important, as you mentioned, is our team report. They don't want to have a positive leader. What they want to have an optimistic leader that will guide them towards this rocky path, and they will this humiliator will teach, besides being guiding, teach what is life and how to be uh, aligned to it. And it's easy. A positive leader will say, this project will go great and will turn into a cheerleader, which it isn't good because always saying, yes, team, we can do it. Yes, team, we can do it. No, it won't bring that. We will have to learn from ourselves. From we will have to do, as you mentioned, but in other words, a post-mortem, what we usually do in engineering. A post-mortem will say, okay, this went good, this went bad, this will have to change our mindset, not going specifically with people say, point it out, but okay, we had this mindset, we will have to change it to this one. And something that we could learn, all the team learn from it, because otherwise excuse me, being positive, it will mean that you will be pointed out directly or indirectly towards someone. But being optimistic is recognizing your flaws and turning them into strengths. So I think optimistic is the good one. if you're facing anything related to work or personal life, being optimistic, I think, is the tool and the strategy to going towards the right path and success at some time by doing that way.
Exactly. And I think, when there are many books out there, right? The Power of Positive Thinking and all these other kind of trendy books, but you really don't hear much about people writing optimism. Maybe we should use AI, and together you and I should write a book with AI on optimism. Because I think if you coach your team around optimism, and you can use real world examples of what are happening with your team probably on a weekly basis, right? Where you thought configuring something was going to take an hour and it took all day, or you thought something was going to give you a certain level of precision of analysis and it's off by feet or meters. All these kinds of things, these setbacks, the optimist says, okay, that really happened. It's bad, but what am I going to learn from it? And so I think, if we try and coach our teams for optimism, they will respect us better too, because we're not ignoring the bad things. Because some of the things and teachings of positive thinking is literally to ignore the bad things. And certainly in the engineering world, that's terrible, because that leads to bridge collapses and all kinds of other more rockets blowing up, et cetera. In the IT world, it may mean more application failures or poor performance, right? There are similar aspects. So I think, be optimistic, acknowledge these bad things that did occur, and use them as training opportunities with your team. What are we going to learn from this mistake, whatever it was, what the failure, whatever it was? What can we walk away from learning from that? And that's the positive or optimistic perspective of that, of that situation. And I am sure at every job, regardless of whether it's accounting or IT or rocket engineering, there are setbacks during the week that you could use as a training opportunity with your team. Just watch for them and use them.
Yeah. Yes. And I think, adding to what you already said, let's say we give an example, well, a versus example. A positive guy or positive girl, after a project that has been saying this project will go amazing, when it fails, it wouldn't be positive, because it was what happened, I didn't know, and it will maybe blame themselves or blame others. But being optimistic all the time will say, okay, the project failed. What can we learn from this? What can we bring to ourselves, to the team? And that's what we, as team reports, want from our humiliator, to be humble in these kind of situations, to understand that maybe if we weren't positive, we were optimistic, but we understood. And that kind of stuff creates a much tighter bond with our leaders, because we understand and we see that this guy doesn't live in fantasy, but live in reality. And bringing reality to life is what we are aiming for. So being optimistic. And I have a question for you. Have you faced maybe this kind of optimistic projects in your life or situations in your life before?
Oh, many, oh boy, many things, right? So I think that I'll just use one this week. I was working on, I happen to have a farm, and so I was working on my farm, and I almost ruptured a hydraulic line on my skid steer piece of equipment. And what I had done is I had neglected the normal way you disconnect it is you power down, disconnect the hydraulics, put the lines in a safe place, and then disconnect from the machine. And of course, as always on a farm, you got lots of projects going on and you're late and it's getting dark. And I neglected to disconnect the hoses first and started to move away from the piece of equipment. And all of a sudden it moved. I'm like, why did that move? And I'm like, oh no, I left the hydraulic lines connected. So the optimist learns from that mistake. Now, if I was pessimist, I'd be like, oh no, I ruptured the lines. I wasn't. I was like, oh, I learned from that. Let me move slowly forward. And I got out and was able to disconnect them. And fortunately, because I had moved away slowly, it didn't yank the line so hard that it damaged them in any way. Now, the optimistic side of me says, you know, I learned a valuable lesson. When you're disconnecting from equipment, always move slowly just in case you neglected to do it the right way.
Mm.
Right. And so the positive thinker is always, I'm going to do it right every time. And, just, is like, oh, those lines will be fine. No, you need to check them and make sure that they're okay and everything. But, I was optimistic. Hey, I may have learned an expensive lesson. If I damage those lines, they're about $100 a piece. Fortunately, not damaged. But I mean, there's always those kinds of life experiences that I think you can leverage, whether it's life or work, and try and reflect back and say, how do I use this as a teaching moment for my team? The teaching moment is that, well, if you approach things with heavy equipment slowly, even if you make a mistake, an error, you can learn from it, and hopefully the damage that you do is minimal. I was fortunate, no damage caused. Obviously, if I'd yanked away, it probably would have broken the connection both on the machine and the piece of equipment, and I'd have two things to fix.
Okay, nice.
How about you?
You.
What's been going on in your life?
Well, I can tell you something that has been going since I'm being employed. Rather than being positive and saying, I'm going to get a job, is not acknowledging that I'm 55 years old, that people who are about 40 years old are having a harsh time finding a job. So what I have done is being optimistic. I understood, okay, I'm out of a job. What I will do is apply to job offers, but also to learn new stuff that either it is new because I haven't know that. I've been specifying myself in AI architecture, very specific and technical stuff. I've been doing coding again because it's really important to find a job that it is related, but also I'm being optimistic towards everything. My mindset among myself, my wife, my son, my friends, my family, my former co-workers have been totally optimistic. And that has paid me back. Life has paid me back by keeping my mind sane. That's the first one. Not going to be nor anxiety nor depressed. By being optimistic, I do exercise. That has helped me a lot. I sleep, man. I sleep when somewhat maybe in a positive mindset wouldn't sleep or would sleep 3 hours. I sleep 7, 8 hours without a problem, and this has helped me a lot towards finding a recurrent income. And also, I forgot to mention that I'm doing some AI consultancy. So in this case, I'm being optimistic. I'm taking control of myself. And I know that I will either have a recurring income or something that is really, really good for me. So I'm being optimistic right now, which is different from what I'm reading at LinkedIn. Sometimes at LinkedIn, I see I'm out of a job for the last 9 months. I cannot find a job. Help me, someone, even though I read like, here's my bank account. Give me money. I say, well, that's being negative and that's not optimistic. Being optimistic has provided with these rewards in life, which I'm taking hold and going forward.
Yeah, I think that, the if you were in the camp of the purely positive thinking, the setbacks of when, let's say, you interviewed for a company and you thought you were doing well and you don't get the offer, the positive thinker can't sleep that night. I was thinking positive. Why didn't it happen?
Yeah,
The optimist says, I'm hopeful. I really like this company, but if they say no, I'll just find another one. Right.
yeah,
So the positive thinker has a tendency to get disappointed more. We're both disappointed. The optimist and the positive thinker are both disappointed when they don't get the job offer. But the optimist realizes that that happens a lot. More often than not, most people don't get the job offer because hundreds of people applied. So you accept it and say it's part of the learning curve. Hey, I got practice at interviewing, and maybe that company just wasn't right for me. So I'm moving on. So
yeah,
I think that the positive thinker gets exhausted. So when we're approaching our team, if somebody is always saying, "Hey, I'm a positive thinker," that's okay. Let them be that way. But what you want to teach them is the whole life perspective of optimism, which is optimism slash realist, being a realist. Everything is not going to be positive. It's not. And if that's the way you're thinking, you're going to be disappointed. If you're an optimist or a realist, you realize a few things are not going to go your way, but that's okay
yeah,
because
indeed.
we're going to
You're
learn from it and move forward.
Yeah, yeah, and I would rather that your way. I applied to a position at a big company, remote, everything was full, and they sent me a questionnaire, 40 questions. I took between 4 to 5 hours to answer that. I didn't put on onto AI to answer that. I did it myself. 4 to 5 hours. So it was, I think it was a Saturday that I did that. I sent it on Sunday. 2 hours later, I received an email. Roberto, we're not going forward with your application. I felt bad then because 2 hours time and an AI system decided that I wasn't a fit for that. Rather than being upset, saying maybe a lot of bad words, and oh my God, I spent all this time. I learned from that experience. I understood that that was this company process. I mean, it's okay, but rather than taking it as a burden and go with I did all this work and I wasn't accepted. There wasn't a human. Okay, I accepted and I kept searching and kept working on myself. So that's the difference between an optimistic person and the one who would be positive, nagging about this company, it is a bad company. No, it is a big company because something, but take control of yourself and keep walking.
And realize too, as you're coaching your team through these things, it isn't that you're going to tell them in over a course of 4 weeks and all of a sudden they're going to be optimists. Realize these are life lessons that people sometimes take years or decades to learn. As humane leaders, we can present the menu of the things that we would like our team to do and achieve. And this one is probably one of the hardest for our team members to accept and adopt. So realize too that whether we're trying to convert ourselves to be more optimistic or whether we're trying to coach our team members, this is going to be slow. It's going to take repeated lessons. It's going to take repeated opportunities where you take a bad situation and show them that we learned from it. So be optimistic, but realistic also, right? Even in our training on optimism and realism, that this is a hard one to wrap your head around, especially if a bunch of bad things happen in a row. It can be challenging to stay the course. But I really think if you try and coach your teams towards optimism instead of positivity, in the long run, you will be better off as a humane leader, and your team members will be better off.
Yes, I will take that as an analogy, what you always say. You're training for a marathon rather than a 100 dash race, 100
Without a
meters,
doubt.
excuse me.
Yep.
So be optimistic.
Absolutely.
Oh, man. Well, I think with this, we can end this episode. And remember, all our audience, be optimistic. It's much better in life.
Absolutely.
Okay? See you next week.